CAD Patternmaking. Let's take a look at the general workflow. To get started, just like in manual hand pattern making, you start with a block. It's a basic garment shape from which a pattern is drafted and edited as a starting point. We also refer to them as a sloper. Working from the block in the program, you can get started in several different ways. You can draft the patterns right on the computer screen. You can take a photograph of them and upload them. You can digitize them and scan them. Let's take a look at each of these. There's also a link on my course connection for various digitizing equipment and methods that I suggest you also take a look at. Drafting. It's the most accurate way to begin pattern making on the computer from a block, or sloper, is to draft the block directly on screen using pattern making software. Some programs will allow you to draft with relative measurements, and other programs will require you to use absolute measurements. But the process of applying the body's measurements to draft a pattern is the same measurements required to draft by hand. This is shown in your pattern making textbook, Chapter 3. Existing manual block patterns can also be photographed, digitized, or scanned into the system, and then checked over and measured for accuracy. Let's take a look at those other methods as well. With some pattern making software, it's possible to photograph existing paper patterns with a digital camera, then upload them onto the computer and digitize them on screen. This method of pattern input is considered more economical than the others, as you do not need an expensive digitizing table or a pattern scanner. However, this is not a widely used method in the fashion industry, as it is not considered as accurate, and a lot of time can be spent checking and adjusting the pattern. Essentially, digitizing means to digitally enter commands with a digitalizing cursor, which is pictured in the lower left of your screen, around the outer points of a paper pattern piece. Next, what I'm going to describe is particular to one system, Gerber AccuMark. The digitizer consists of a table with a menu and cursor. For example, to digitize a pattern piece on the Gerber AccuMark system, the pattern is first secured onto the digitizing table with masking tape. The cursor is then used to enter information about the piece on the menu, such as the piece name, piece category, piece description, and sizing. This is done by placing a crosshairs of the cursor over the instruction or letter on the menu pad and pressing the A button on the cursor. The beginning of the grain line is then determined by placing the crosshairs of the cursor and pressing the A button over the first and last point of the grain line on the pattern piece. The outline of the pattern piece is traced in a clockwise direction. CW is a shorthand for that, by placing the crosshairs of the cursor over points to be entered and pressing the A button. Other buttons can be pressed to add graded points and notches, as well as internal markings and labels to the pattern. Another method to input patterns is to run them through a scanner. And the computer, the hardware components of a scanner, will input the data into the program. General tools utilized in software programs are similar to the same techniques used by hand. Let's take a look at those. Dart manipulations. Darts can be manipulated, rotated, combined, and distributed easily. Dart legs can be balanced and checked, and the computer is able to determine the fold back of the dart accurately. Added fullness to pattern pieces is very easy to do. The computer is able to calculate an amount of fullness either in inches or percentage, and as this fullness and disperse this fullness evenly through a section while making good the line. Notches can be added and removed easily with the click of a button. You are also able to assign different notch types to a piece. Seams can be easily added, removed, changed, and increased without having to retrace the pattern or stick extra backing paper onto the edges. Seams can be stripped off or hidden for pattern making and alterations so that the true line or the sew line of the pattern is being worked on. There are many functions that help to ensure the seam corners are cut correctly and most easily for the sewing of the garment. Seams can be turned back, for example on a tapered hem, squared off, or matched. The pattern maker needs to know how the garment may be sewn together to be able to choose which special corner they need to apply. The computer can easily create pleats, including knife and box pleats, using a function called the piece pleats. You would just input how deep you want the pleats and which direction. Seamed panels. All panels can be drafted on the block and traced off. The pattern maker can then extract the panel pieces by using the function piece create trace or extract commands. Copies of the block as a draft can be stored as a reference and returned to when needed. Pieces where the shape or measurements are taken from an existing piece are made simple on the computer. Pieces such as facings, collars, waistbands, and bindings can be made entirely by the program once you have indicated the desired width and parameters that are needed. The computer can store information for annotations with the pattern piece. This includes the GO, or the grain line orientation, piece name, number, type, cutting information, dates, internal lines or markings like drill holes used to mark construction details, and any other instructions. Annotations and information for each pattern piece can be printed on the piece each time it is plotted. A fabric code color can also be assigned to each pattern piece to indicate different fabrics such as the self or main fabric, lining, and fusing, just as different colored pens or colored card is used often when making manual paper patterns. On the computer, it is easy to work on the half pattern, and then the pattern piece can be mirrored easily and with complete accuracy to create symmetrical patterns. The computer program or separate packages can assist in creating the range of sizes larger and smaller than the sample size used for creating the pattern. It can only do this once a grade rule has been defined. A grade rule is a specified amount of distance, usually as XY coordinates, to create a grade change between sizes. Some programs can provide a default grade rule and others will require you to establish your own. But once done, it can be applied and edited over and over again. A pattern is stacked or nested to check the grading between each size. The process of drawing or platting the pattern pieces according to the lay planning is making a marker. This is unique and specific to every single fabric used in a line. Lay planning is the act of setting pattern pieces on the fabric in order to minimize wastage. Even though the lay planner is trying to use the fabric as efficiently as possible, they must also buffer each piece. And this is leaving just enough space so that the cutter can cleanly and accurately cut around each piece without damage to the one next to it. To print out a paper version of the marker, you would need a plotter. This is a machine that will output a digital paper pattern or marker. The plotted marker is then laid on top of the fabric pieces to cut the garment pieces. Information found for this slideshow was taken from Patternmaking, Chapter 7, Patternmaking and Technology by Denik Chunman Low. Thank you.